One system opening that you'll face quite often in your games is the King's Indian attack. That is where white goes knight f3 and follows with the move g3, bishop g2, castles. And the thing about King's Indian attack is it's of course a very flexible system for white. Let's say, for example, if we were to play some very classical development like e6, bishop e7, just normal solid QGD, well, white gets quite a few nice options. They can go for d3, and play it the way Bobby Fischer liked to with a 1e4 move order, going for this King's Indian attack against a French/Tarrasch setup. Of course, this is perfectly fine for black, but also it's kind of what white is aiming for when he plays this opening as well, right? Going e5, knight f1, and just, building up with very automatic moves to, create an attack against the black king. So if you don't like your king coming under attack, this could be a little bit annoying. And you also have to be ready for other things they can play. For example, after c4 castles, you have to be ready to play the bishop e7 Catalan after d4. And you also have to be ready to play against a double Fianchetto with b3, which is also a pretty legitimate system for white. So the point is that g3 is a very flexible system, and if we play normally, they will kind of get to choose the type of structure they want, whether it's with d4 or d3 or something a little bit different. So the line I'm going to recommend for black is one that, well, in the Lichess Opening Explorer, white's scoring 53% win rate across all the games with g3, so it's a pretty dangerous weapon, right? However, when you play the move g6, well, already that gets a lot closer to 50% for us. If you want to hear something funny, the best scoring move for black in Lichess is the move bishop h3, because too many players pre-moved bishop g2 and lost the bishop and lost the game. But of course, this is a serious video, and we're going to cover serious moves. And by the way, if you are serious about improving your chess, hit the red subscribe button. So what's the idea of g6? Well, it's not just that we're Fianchettoing our bishop as well, saying if you can't beat them, join them. But also if white does play castles, which is the move that you will face the most often, we go e5. And now we have two pawns side by side in the center, nicely guarded by the bishop. After d3, our knight goes to e7, so it's not blocking in the bishop by going to f6. Also, one alternative, you can also start with the move knight c6. The idea of this is that if they play a move like e4, you get this extra option for the endgame lovers among us to go take, and bishop to g4. So knight d4 is a little bit annoying, hitting this guy, and if they stop with c3, you can go knight f6, attack this pawn, and you sort of get an endgame that is at the very least equal. Okay, computer is saying it's better to castle short, but if you want to be a maverick and castle long, that's perfectly fine as well. You're also threatening knight e4, so that's one advantage of long castles at least. But yeah, this is a pretty nice position for black. You've got some nice pin to annoy white a bit. But that's the alternative. Knight e7 is the most standard move in the position. White will normally play the move e4 at some point, either immediately or playing a move knight bd2 first. In practice, they play knight bd2 a bit more often, so let's go with that. e4, knight c6. And at this point, there are two main ideas for white. One is just to play ed5 and just open up the position, and the other one is to try to play a little bit more slowly, playing moves like rook e1 and c3, and playing a more slow, kind of reversed Fianchetto Pirtz. Because actually, this is where the idea of this bishop g7, e5, d5 system comes from. It actually comes from a tricky move order that can be very annoying if you're playing against someone who plays a King's Indian defense. Well, let's say they play their normal King's Indian after g3, so like knight f6, bishop g2. They're just playing their King's Indian setup, not really looking at what moves you're playing. Well, e4 can be a little bit annoying, and after d6, obviously e5 can be a bit of a problem. Well, we're seeing here that white's basically now playing the exact same setup I recommend against the King's Indian, but playing it with colours reversed as such. Now, of course, when you play g3, you have to be ready for moves like e5, when you can't really play a King's Indian attack so easily anymore. Or, after d5, you can play a King's Indian attack and stop e5, but yeah, of course, this is a video more from black's perspective than from white's, but just showing you where the inspiration for this particular setup comes from for black. We're basically playing an annoying line that is very frustrating for King's Indian players to play against, but we're playing it with colours reversed, and saying that the extra tempo is not actually that useful for white here. By the way, one principle I think you guys are really going to love is that after rook e1, actually, I'm not going to give it away. Let's make it a little puzzle for you guys, see who can get it right in the comments. What do you think is the best move for black to play in this position after white's move rook e1? So we'll return to this position at the end of the video to see who got it right. But anyway, let's continue the position after ed5, because this is a pretty standard structure. And the thing is, you already have a space advantage, right? So you don't really need to do anything crazy here. You can just steadily improve the position. So moves like, for example, h6 are often seen. So you can play a later bishop e6 without them, be able to annoy us with knight g5 and such. Knight c4, we can just go rook e8, just keep the pawn defended. You could also start with rook e8, that would be fine as well. So if they go a4. I mean, black has many decent moves at this point. In Lichess, black's scoring 55% win rate with a5 and just, fixing the pawn in place and going bishop f5. This is a pretty dangerous weapon, and I think on a practical level, white will struggle a little bit to, keep his d3 pawn safe and to get some counterplay. There are other moves for black as well, but this is a pretty decent indication of what black is kind of aiming for when he plays this. He just wants to, build up the position, slowly improve his piece placement. Like I said, c3, you're often going to go bishop f5 and just kind of hit the pawn on d3, which is actually the most common move. Though I would say that even a move like knight b6 might be even more precise. One way you can often outplay your opponents in chess is by trying to set up favorable exchanges, and here we see if white takes it, our rook has now activated without needing to develop. You might say, oh, double pawns are a weakness, but when they're in one pawn island and when you're capturing toward the center with the rook's pawn, the double pawns actually become a strength in that case, just so you know. I share a lot more tips like this, by the way, these strategic principles, in the lessons I do for my group coaching program. If you do want to apply for that, just click the Calendly link in the description below, and we'll get on a call and take it from there. Or, if you don't qualify for a program, I'll cancel the call, but either way, you'll know where you stand. So that shows how some of these lines can play out. One other approach that white can play in these positions is to play a move like c4 at some stage. I don't think you'll face it that often here, but if they do play it, I would probably just go d takes c4, and you're not technically winning a pawn. They can win it back with queen a4. But after knight c6, queen c4, and e5, you just get a very nice reverse Sicilian, where, instead of, let's say, the open Sicilian lines where you have like d4, ed4, knight d4, or, in the reverse version, c takes d5, knight takes d5. Here, white's queen is on c4, and at first it might seem like that's a more active setup for white. But actually, it's a bad version for white, because what's going to happen is at some moment you're going to have bishop e6 to attack the queen. Okay, you could even do it here, actually. And white's going to lose even more time moving this queen around. Like if they go queen c2, I like to go h6 just so I don't have to calculate any knight g5 moves. And in a lot of lines, you'll even be able to play moves like knight d4 and, either, attack the queen, kick it around even more, or, if they do take, you get this very nice structure for black after the move b6, where you're just going to gradually build up, pile a lot of pressure on that weak pawn on e2, and anyone who's like, let's say, has looked at some Morochi bind pawn structures will recognize that this is an incredibly nice pawn structure for black. Actually, in practice, you're probably more likely to get c4 in this position, actually. It's fairly common on Lichess. And there are a few good replies. If you want a more open position, you can take castles and, say that with your extra space in the center, you kind of get like a good sort of Leningrad Dutch there. If you want to keep more tension in the position, you can go c6 and just keep the pawn on d5. Doesn't mean that white can try to put some pressure on the center, but in general, I think it's also a good approach from black's point of view. Well, it scores 50% win rate in the Lichess Opening Explorer, so even better than the dc4 move in that case, if that's what you're going on. I guess the saying, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, but okay, the statistics still give some idea at least of, what moves you might get in your own games, and actually the move d4 is one that's surprisingly common in the Lichess database, but it's a strategic mistake after e4. The knight is just going to get kicked to a bad square. Of course, knight e5 loses the knight f6, but after knight e4, f5, we're just in a great spot to consolidate our center, and the bishop is just absolutely horrible on g2. The knight is really not much better. So white could play a little bit differently, and one question I think that is important to answer is, what if white plays d4? And this is one line where, after knight f6, castles and castles, we've actually transposed to the Fianchetto Grunfeld. And this is something that does have a lot of theory. It's probably outside the scope of the video to go into every single little detail. But if you do want a little bit of a shortcut here for black, then a sort of tricky move that's been scoring very well on Lichess is the move of knight to c6 here. The solid approach is to go c6. It's the way I'd play if you just want to solidly equalize, and it transposes a whole lot of Grandmaster games that, like I said, we don't have time to get through it all in the video, but knight c6 is an interesting shortcut that actually gave me a few headaches in a blitz game a couple of years ago when I was playing this with white. The idea is after cd5, knight d5, that if they do kick the knight away with e4, we play knight b6, d5, the knight goes to a5, and it looks a little bit ugly, but you are going to be able to play c6 and get decent counterplay against white's center. Obviously, you're very happy if they play d takes c6, because after knight takes c6, I mean, your knight is just awaiting this very juicy square on d4. And the pin is going to be a bit annoying for white as well. Like, you might notice how our bishop on g7 has a wide open diagonal, but in this case, the bishop on g2 is rather stuck behind his own pieces, which is not what you want when you play these Fianchetto positions as white. I mean, white could play bishop f4. It would be, I think, a better move in this position. But, okay, black's still doing okay. I mean, you can play c takes d5. It's a game of chess. Maybe white's a tiny bit better with best play, but it's nothing terrible. And, when you are playing any shortcuts, it is a risk you take that, if they play perfectly, they get a small edge out of the opening, but we're saying, okay, you're probably not going to find the moves over the board. Because most of the time, when you surprise the opponent, they will start making mistakes. And here again, knight b6 is the main line and has a whole bunch of theory that, again, we would not have the time to really do justice to in this video. But if you want a little shortcut, I can suggest either the move bishop f5, which makes it hard for him to get into e4 break. Or if you want to play like Carlsen, you can play e5 here and just break through in the center. It looks like a pawn sack at first, but the tactics actually kind of work out, where if they go d5, you can flick in knight c3 and then play knight takes c5, and then you can even perhaps fight for an advantage because of white having his isolated pawns on the queen side. And our bishops have just very beautiful diagonals, right? So normally white will play knight takes d5, and here's where we play our little trick of e4. Don't take with the queen because knight e5 is going to be a bit embarrassing, but with e4 we do actually get the pawn back as such. If they play knight g5 takes, well, we are attacking the d4 pawn, so this would just be an equal exchange of pawns. Well, I don't know if an exchange of pawns is going to be truly equal, but at least computer is saying that with the strong bishops and the open files for the rooks, that the black is doing fine here. And if they play some other move, well, they can't really play e3 because then the knight is hanging, so that's one point. If you try to move the knight away with, I don't know, knight c3 or something, then again takes, and knight d4 is pretty pleasant for black. The fact you're hitting the bishop does give you a bit of an initiative to work with here. So the move knight e5 is probably the best move for white, and after queen d5, the only thing that's a little bit awkward is the fact that you are facing a bit of a pin with this bishop. But if you're able to consolidate the e-pawn and attack the d-pawn, then you are going to have a pretty nice position. In the case of bishop f4, I would probably just play... Well, my first thought was just to play bishop f5 at this point. And, rook c1 looks quite tempting, but actually you can play queen b6. And it turns out that, you're actually only exchanging the pawns rather than losing a pawn as black. So, you can play bishop d4, and, I mean, white is maybe it's maybe a little bit better here. But, yeah, it's still definitely quite a playable position for black. And there are alternatives as well, like rook e8, for example, is probably a little bit of an improvement here, where after rook c1, queen to b6, we can, exchange the pawns and definitely keep white's advantage to a minimum in this case. So that's just showing you, how these positions play out. Also, if they don't play cd5, if they go knight c3, I would just play d takes c4 and get some nice pressure against this pawn. So, if e4, then you can go bishop g4 and, get a lot of very nice pressure against d4, and the pin is definitely quite annoying for white. Black is scoring, 50% win rate in Lichess, and honestly his position is probably a lot better even than that. And if they go d5, then, knight... There's actually a few good squares for the knights. I kind of like knight b4 just to attack this pawn and, just get rid of this pawn as quickly as we possibly can is a nice way to play it. So finally, if they do play a quieter move, let's say they go knight bd2, in that case, I would probably go bishop e6, just a fun way to play. If cd5, bishop d5, the bishop now has got active and we're stopping him playing e4 so easily. Actually, if they play rook e1, there's even a nice little trick here for black that you may be able to pause the video and find if you want to. As a way we can win a pawn with a tactic of knight takes d4. So you can see there's a very tricky system, very easy for white to, go astray when our pieces are so active. And if they play a move like b3, then a plan that often works well here is just to play a5, a4. Often you'll play knight e4 as well, and you just get quite decent pressure against the white queenside and center here. Again, probably not 100% equalizing, but you get an interesting position with definitely chances to play for the win. So there you have it. That's basically my recommendation against the King's Indian attack. And not only that, but we also saw how to play the Fianchetto Grunfeld as black. So let's say if you play, the Grunfeld, then, this could be, the start of a repertoire with d5 and, if they play, let's say, takes and knight f3, you can sort of see now how the positions play out with the early knight c6, because it would transpose what we were just looking at. Or if, let's say, they play knight f3, well, we saw castles and knight c6, and again, by transposition, how these positions were playing out for black. Of course, you do still have to be ready for moves like e4, so it's not a complete repertoire against the Fianchetto Grunfeld, but it covers, most of what you will face in your own games at least. But returning to the King's Indian attack, to summarize, we're basically going for g6. Most of the time, your opponents are going to play bishop g2 and castles, just lazily completing the setup. But then you get a very nice center, you go knight e7, castles, knight c6. But a very solid and very flexible position with a lot of scope to outplay the opponent. And also, yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then yeah, do make sure to hit the like, comment with your thoughts on this variation. I paused there because I just remembered that I did have one puzzle I did set you guys of what you would play after rook e1. I know it might seem like a while ago by now. So you could just play a move like h6 and, after takes, you'll transpose back to the lines we saw with ed5 immediately. But I also like the idea of playing d4. Well done if you recognize that d4 gains in strength after rook e1 is played. Because now white wishes the rook was back on f1 to support the f4 break. And you can definitely, expand on the queen side and, play it like a sort of King's Indian with colors reversed. But where your bishop on g7 kind of stops them playing their usual mating attack so effectively. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next training. Until then, take care.